In a sterile conference room at ConnectTech's headquarters, a 42-year-old tech executive was about to receive devastating news. What started as a routine Tuesday morning meeting took a shocking turn when she came face-to-face with corporate betrayal. Emily Carter wasn't your typical Silicon Valley founder. For 12 years, she had spent her life building ConnectTech from a garage startup into a billion-dollar empire, known for her visionary AI algorithms and unwavering integrity. When she encountered her co-founder Jake delivering the words, "We're letting you go," just weeks before their IPO announcement, she had no idea she was walking into the fight of her professional life. Carter's stunned silence that would lead to the most dramatic corporate revenge story in tech history. What began as a cold termination would become a technological revolution. The Silicon Valley ecosystem would never be the same after the woman they tried to erase built something even better. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It started with silence. Not the kind you notice immediately, but the kind that seeps in quietly, like water under a door. It was a Tuesday morning when I realized I hadn't been copied on the thread. The subject line read, Q3 Capital Alignment, Final Investor Briefing. I blinked. 12 years. That's how long I'd been at ConnectTech. There wasn't a single investor call, stakeholder pitch, or capital roadmap I hadn't either led or written from scratch. And yet this time, my name wasn't there. At first, I thought it was a mistake. People forget, threads get messy. But when I searched the internal calendar for the call, it was marked private. I felt a chill, but it wasn't cold in the office. Instead of asking publicly, I waited. I watched. No one mentioned it. Not my team, not Jake, not even Kim from Investor Relations, who used to run every financial deck by me before showing it to the board. It felt off, like I had been gently pushed out of a room I used to design. Then the message came in. Sophie, the lead engineer I'd hired personally 3 years ago, messaged me on Slack. "Emily, they're in a meeting with the board and the new backers. Your name didn't come up. I thought you were on this." I stared at the screen longer than I care to admit. Sophie didn't mean to stir anything. She had always been earnest, observant. She noticed what others ignored. "Thanks for letting me know," I typed back calmly. But my palms had gone cold. It wasn't just a meeting. It was the final funding round, the biggest one since Series C. And I wasn't just anyone. I had brought in the first 3 institutional investors. I personally maintained the trust bridges with every single one of them. They knew me, not Jake. They knew my signature on every forecast, every projection. Why wasn't I in that room? Through the glass wall of my office, I watched the conference room fill up. Jake adjusted his tie. Kim reviewed papers. A few unfamiliar suits took seats at the table. I watched them laugh at something Jake said, and for the first time in my career, I realized I might already be on the outside before anyone said it out. Loud. I didn't sleep that night. Not from panic, more like static. My mind wouldn't settle. Caught in a loop of questions I couldn't quite form. The moment Sophie messaged me, something shifted. The air around me felt different. Hollow, lighter, but not in a good way. By morning, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. At 9 sharp, a calendar notification popped up on my screen. Catch up. Emily, Jake, and HR, Confe. No agenda, no attachments, just 20 minutes blocked off, starting in 5. I stood up automatically, clutching my notebook like I always did, though I had nothing to write down. Something in me whispered, "Don't go." But I shut it down. I was the kind of professional who showed up no matter how awkward the room felt. As I stepped into the conference room, Jake was already seated, hair slicked back, navy suit, no tie. Kim from HR sat beside him, expression carefully neutral. She didn't smile. "Emily, thanks for making time," Jake said, folding his hands like, "We were about to discuss quarterly projections." I gave a nod and sat down slowly. My gut tightened, but I said nothing. Then came the sentence, the one that emptied everything. "We're letting you go." Just like that. No preamble, no discussion, no performance review. Just a flat, well-rehearsed line. I blinked. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. The words sat in my throat, heavy and shapeless. Jake continued. His tone clipped but oddly relieved. "After internal alignment with the board and reviewing our direction for the next phase of growth, we've decided to restructure our leadership layer. Unfortunately, your position has been impacted." It was corporate speak, carefully engineered to sound impersonal. But underneath it was the unmistakable truth. I was being erased. Kim slid a sealed envelope across the table. Her hands trembled slightly. I watched her eyes, not the envelope. She couldn't meet my gaze. I looked down. The date printed on the letter. Yesterday. They had known before I walked into the room, before the meeting invite was sent, before Sophie messaged me. This wasn't sudden. It was scripted. "Effective immediately," Jake added, as if that made it any cleaner. "We'll ensure a smooth transition. Your accounts will be disabled by noon. Security will escort you for your belongings if needed. If needed. Like I might throw a chair through the window." But I didn't move. For the first time in my life, I was completely still. Not calm, not composed, just numb. I looked at Jake. This man I had mentored when he was 23, taught how to navigate client pushback, edited his first deck, word by word. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. 3 minutes. That's how long it took to fire me after 12 years, 7 expansions, and $1. $5 billion in annual revenue, most of which I had built, client by client, line by line. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply stood, envelope in, hand, and walked out. Not out of dignity, out of shock. Because when your whole world collapses in silence, your body goes on autopilot, and your soul waits behind, too stunned to follow. The click of the door behind me felt final. I stepped. Out of conference room A, gripping the envelope like it might burn through my palm, my heels made soft, unsteady taps on the polished floor. And for the first time in years, no one looked up. Not Amanda from Strategy, who usually greeted me by name. Not Charles from Legal, who once called me his reality check. Not even the new front desk associate I trained last quarter. They knew. Everyone knew. It had only been minutes since the meeting, but the silence in the hallway told me word traveled faster than sound. I walked back to my office, if I could still call it that, and slowly pushed open the glass door with my name etched in silver across it. Emily Carter, founder and CEO. It glinted under the fluorescent lights, unaware that the title no longer belonged to me. I closed the door behind me and stood there, frozen. Then I moved like someone trying not to disturb a sleeping animal. Quiet, deliberate, mechanical. I pulled out a file box from under my desk and started filling it without thinking. A framed photo of my first product team. The Japanese bonsai a client had sent after a successful launch in Tokyo. The notebook where I drafted our original API flowchart on a red-eye flight to Seattle. Each item felt heavier than it should have. Then came the footsteps. I turned. Sophie stood in the doorway, small, awkward, eyes wide with something between disbelief and heartbreak. "They really did it," she whispered. I nodded once, swallowing hard. My throat burned, but my voice wouldn't rise above a whisper. They didn't even let me speak. She took a hesitant step forward. "I don't understand. You built this place. Jake was. He was your protege. I've seen the pictures." I forced a smile. "Things change." Her eyes welled. And before I could stop her, she crossed the office and wrapped her arms around me. For a moment, I let myself lean into it, let myself feel the weight of what I was losing. Not just the company, not just the title, but the relationships. The trust, the belief that hard work and loyalty meant something. When she pulled away, her cheeks were wet. "What are you going to do?" I looked around my office one last time. At the whiteboard still covered in my handwriting from yesterday's strategy session. At the awards lining the wall, industry recognition that bore my name but would soon be claimed by others. At the window overlooking the parking lot where I used to arrive first and leave last. "I don't know yet," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, something was stirring. Something that felt less like defeat and more like the quiet before a storm. The security guard was kind. That made it worse somehow. He didn't make me feel like a criminal being escorted out. Instead, he walked beside me with the careful gentleness reserved for someone recently bereaved. Which, I suppose, I was. "Take your time, Ms. Carter," he said, standing by the door while I finished packing. His name tag read Marcus, and I realized I'd never learned his name in all the years I'd passed him in the lobby. Another small failure that felt enormous now. The box wasn't heavy, but my hands shook as I carried it. 12 years of my life reduced to personal items that could fit in a single container. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent so much time building the company that I'd barely accumulated anything that was truly mine. Walking through the lobby felt like a perp walk. Every head turned, but no one made eye contact. The silence was deafening, broken only by the soft ding of the elevator and the whisper of my heels against marble. I'd chosen those heels this morning, back when I was still Emily Carter, CEO. Now I was just Emily Carter, former employee, walking out with a cardboard box like every other corporate casualty. The elevator ride down felt eternal. Marcus stood beside me, occasionally glancing at the numbers as they descended. I stared straight ahead, watching our reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked smaller than I remembered, older, like someone who'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "You built something special here," Marcus said quietly as we reached the ground floor. "Whatever happens next, that can't be taken away." I turned to look at him, surprised by the compassion in his voice. "Thank you, Marcus." He nodded. "Take care of yourself, Ms. Carter." The lobby doors slid open, and I stepped into the California. Sunshine. The parking garage felt like a safe harbor, dark, cool, anonymous. I found my car and set the box in the passenger seat, then sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. "Are you okay? This is insane." Then another from Leah Martinez, our former COO who'd left 6 months ago. "Just heard. Call me when you're ready. This isn't over." More messages flooded in. Former employees, current team members, even a few clients who'd somehow already gotten word. The tech world was small, and news traveled at fiber optic speed. But nothing from Jake. Nothing from the board members who'd sat through countless presentations where I'd outlined the future they were now claiming as their own. Radio silence from the people who'd known me longest. I finally started the car and drove home in a daze. My house in Palo Alto felt different when I walked in, less like a sanctuary and more like a museum of my former life. Everything was exactly as I'd left it that morning, but I was fundamentally changed. I poured a glass of wine at 2 p.m. and didn't feel guilty about it. I sat on my back deck, looking out at the garden I never had time to tend, and finally let myself process what had happened. Jake, my co-founder, my partner, my friend, the person I'd trusted most in the world had looked me in the eye and erased me from the company we'd built together. The betrayal cut deeper than the professional loss. It was personal, intimate, devastating. We'd started ConnectTech in my garage 13 years ago, 2 kids with a vision and no money, working 18-hour days on pizza and determination. I'd been the technical mind. He'd been the business development charmer. We'd complemented each other perfectly, or so I'd thought. But somewhere along the way, things had shifted. Jake had become more interested in the optics of success than the substance of innovation. Board meetings became more important than product development. Investor dinners trumped team morale. I'd watched him change, slowly but unmistakably, into someone I barely recognized. Still, I'd trusted him. Even when he'd pushed for decisions I disagreed with, even when he'd started excluding me from conversations I should have been part of, I'd believed in our partnership. I'd believed in us. I was wrong. My phone rang. Kara Johnson, my mentor and one of the few people in tech I truly respected. She'd retired from the corporate world 5 years ago to focus on her nonprofit, but she still had her finger on the pulse of Silicon Valley gossip. "Emily, darling, I just heard. How are you holding up?" Kara's voice was warm, maternal in a way that made my chest tight. "I'm processing." "Of course you are. Listen, I'm coming over. Don't argue with me." She hung up before I could protest. 20 minutes later, she was at my door with Thai takeout and a bottle of expensive bourbon. "Talk to me," she said, settling into my kitchen chair like she belonged there. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the missed emails, the excluded meetings, the cold efficiency of my termination. I told her about Jake's inability to meet my eyes, about Kim's trembling hands, about the security escort that felt like a funeral procession. Kara listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of sympathy. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "You know this isn't about your performance," she said finally. "I know." "And you know this isn't about the company's direction." "I know that too. This is about fear. Jake's fear, the board's fear. They're scared of your vision, your independence, your unwillingness to compromise your values for short-term gains. They're scared that you'll always be seen as the real founder, the real innovator. So they removed the threat." I laughed bitterly. "By destroying me professionally." "No, sweetheart. By setting you free." I stared at her. "Free to do what? I just lost everything I've worked for." "You lost a job at a company that no longer deserves you. But you didn't lose your skills, your vision, your relationships, or your reputation. You're 42 years old, Emily. You're not done building things." That night, after Kara left, I sat in my home office surrounded by the remnants of my career. Awards gathering dust, framed articles about ConnectTech's early successes, photos from product launches and team celebrations. All of it felt like ancient history. But Kara's words echoed in my mind. I wasn't done building things. I opened my laptop and started typing. Not a resignation letter or a LinkedIn update about my next chapter. Instead, I began outlining ideas that had been simmering in the back of my mind for months. Innovations that Jake and the board had deemed too risky, too ambitious, too far ahead of market demand. Maybe they were right about the market, but maybe the market was ready for someone willing to take those risks. I worked until sunrise, filling page after page with concepts, technical specifications, and strategic frameworks. By the time the sun came up, I had the skeleton of something new, something that could be bigger, better, and more impactful than ConnectTech had ever been. I had the foundation of my revenge. The call to Sophie came at 7 a.m., 3 days after my termination. I'd spent those days in a strange limbo, sleeping too much, eating too little, and oscillating between rage and despair. But I'd also been thinking, planning, and I needed an ally. "Emily?" Sophie's voice was cautious, probably worried I was calling to vent or cry or ask her to leak information about what was happening at ConnectTech in my absence. "I need to see you," I said instead. "Can you meet me for coffee? Somewhere not in Palo Alto." "Of course. Are you okay?" "I'm getting there. Blue Bottle in San Francisco, the one on Valencia. 1 hour." I hung up before she could ask more questions. I needed to see her face when I pitched this idea. I needed to gauge whether she was as frustrated with ConnectTech's direction as I suspected, or if I was projecting my own disillusionment onto her. The drive to San Francisco gave me time to rehearse my approach. I couldn't come across as bitter or desperate. This had to be about opportunity, not revenge, even though revenge was a significant motivating factor. Sophie was brilliant, principled, and ambitious. If I could appeal to those qualities, I might have a chance. She was already there when I arrived, nursing a cortado and looking nervous. Sophie Lee had always been understated. Average height, dark hair usually pulled back in, a practical ponytail, clothes that prioritized comfort over style. But her eyes were sharp, and when she focused on a problem, you could practically see the gears turning. "You look terrible," she said as I sat down. "Thanks. I feel worse." "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I just meant—" "I know what you meant. And you're right." I ordered an espresso and studied her face. "How are things at the office?" Her expression darkened. "Weird. Jake sent out this company-wide email about new leadership structures and exciting strategic pivots. He didn't mention your name once. It was like you'd never existed." "And how's the team taking it?" "Not well. Half of them are confused, the other half are pissed. Marcus from DevOps asked me directly what happened, and I didn't know what to say. The official line seems to be that you decided to pursue other opportunities." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Right. Because I chose to leave 3 weeks before our IPO announcement." Sophie leaned forward. "Emily, what really happened in that room?" I told her everything. The missed meetings, the corporate doublespeak, the security escort. When I finished, her face was flushed with anger. "That's unconscionable. You built that company from nothing. Jake was a business development intern when you hired him." "I know. But that's not why I asked you here." She raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment that would determine whether I'd be plotting my comeback alone or with my most trusted ally. "I want to start something new, something better, and I want you to be my co-founder." Sophie blinked. "What?" "I've been working on some concepts, ideas I'd been pushing at ConnectTech that Jake kept shutting down. AI-driven personalization engines, predictive social networking, adaptive content algorithms. Stuff that's 2 years ahead of what anyone else is doing." "Emily, that sounds amazing, but nothing. We could build something revolutionary. Something that makes ConnectTech look like a relic." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. "You're talking about competing directly with them. I'm talking about making them irrelevant." That's a big leap. I mean, the resources alone. I have connections, savings, and a lot of very wealthy people who are about to be very disappointed when ConnectTech's IPO tanks because they fired their most innovative leader. Sophie looked up at me, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. Fear warring with excitement. Loyalty to her current job battling with the appeal of building something from scratch. "What would you call it?" she asked. "Tech front." "Tech front," she repeated, tasting the words. "I like it. It sounds like we're on the bleeding edge." "We would be. The question is whether you're willing to take that leap with me." She was quiet again, but I could see her processing, calculating, dreaming. Sophie had always been frustrated by ConnectTech's increasingly conservative approach to innovation. I'd watched her bite her tongue in meetings when Jake would shoot down her more ambitious proposals. I'd seen her working on side projects after hours, exploring technologies the company wasn't ready to embrace. "What about non-compete clauses?" she asked finally. "Already had my lawyer review them. They're narrowly written. We can't recruit ConnectTech employees or steal clients for 6 months. But there's nothing preventing us from developing competing technology, especially if it's sufficiently differentiated." And funding? I have enough to get us started. Minimal viable product, small team, basic infrastructure. If we can prove the concept, I know people who will write checks. She nodded slowly. Who else would you want on the team? Tom Foster from Legal is tired of being undervalued there. He's been with ConnectTech since the beginning, and Jake treats him like a secretary. Leah Martinez has been itching to get back into the game since she left. She's got the operations expertise we'd need. What about David Zhang? I paused. David was a venture capitalist who'd been one of ConnectTech's early investors. He was tough, pragmatic, and not particularly sentimental about business relationships. But he was also smart enough to recognize talent when he saw it. David's still invested in ConnectTech. That could be complicated. Or it could be an advantage. He's got a front-row seat to watch Jake run the company into the ground. How long before he starts looking for alternatives? She had a point. David wasn't the type to throw good money after bad. If ConnectTech started stumbling without me, and I suspected it would, he might be very interested in backing a superior alternative. You're right, I said. David could be a valuable ally down the line. Sophie finished her coffee and looked at me directly. If I do this, and I'm not saying I will yet, what would be my role? CTO, equal partner, your name on the patents, your vision driving the technical roadmap. Everything you should have had at ConnectTech but never got the chance to build. Her eyes lit up. Full technical autonomy? As long as it aligns with our strategic goals, yes. And equity? 25%. Vesting over 4 years. She whistled softly. That's generous. It's fair. I'm not interested in building another company where one person holds all the power. I want true partnerships, shared vision, collective success. Unlike ConnectTech. Exactly unlike ConnectTech. Sophie stood up abruptly. I need to think about it. It's huge. I know, take your time, but not too much time. If we're going to do this, we need to move fast. The market window won't stay open forever. She nodded. Give me 3 days? 3 days. After she left, I sat in the coffee shop for another hour, watching people hurry past on the sidewalk. Everyone looked purposeful, driven, like they knew exactly where they were going. For the first time in days, I felt that sense of direction returning. My phone buzzed with a text from Kara. How are you feeling today, darling? I typed back. Like I'm about to build something extraordinary. Her response came immediately. That's my girl. Just remember, the best revenge is massive success. I smiled, probably the first genuine smile I'd managed since Tuesday morning. Kara was right, of course. But as I walked back to my car, I couldn't help thinking that massive success and revenge weren't mutually exclusive. In fact, they might be exactly the same thing. Sophie's call came on day 2 of her 3-day deadline. I was in my home office, surrounded by legal documents and financial projections when my phone buzzed. I'm in, she said without preamble. I set down my pen and smiled. Just like that? I went back to ConnectTech yesterday and watched Jake fumble through a technical presentation about our Q4 roadmap. He used words like synergistic innovation and paradigm-shifting solutions without understanding what any of it actually meant. I realized I couldn't stay there and watch him destroy everything we built. Welcome to TechFront, co-founder. God, that feels good to say. When do we start? How's tomorrow? Within a week, we had secured a small office space in Soma. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms above a coffee shop with decent internet and enough space for whiteboards. The contrast to ConnectTech's gleaming headquarters was stark, but there was something liberating about starting from scratch. No corporate bureaucracy, no committees, no Jake second-guessing every decision. Tom Foster was our first recruit. I'd expected him to need convincing, but when I called him, he laughed. Emily, I've been waiting for this call since Tuesday. Jake tried to have me draft a non-disparagement clause to add to your severance package. I told him to handle his own dirty work. And? And he backed down. He knows he can't afford to lose anyone else right now. But I'm giving my notice. Tomorrow. When do you need me? Leah was trickier. She'd left ConnectTech to spend time with her family, and I wasn't sure she was ready to jump back into the startup grind. But when I explained our vision over lunch in Menlo Park, her eyes lit up. You know what I missed most about the early days? She said. The feeling that we were building something that mattered, not just another social media platform, but technology that could genuinely improve people's lives. Jake lost sight of that somewhere along the way. So you'll join? As head of operations, absolutely. But I have conditions. No more 60-hour weeks unless it's truly critical. No pointless meetings. And if we succeed, we share the success with everyone who helped build it. Deal. Our core team was small, but formidable. Sophie handled all technical architecture, designing systems that could scale from 0 to millions of users. Tom managed legal and compliance, ensuring we stayed on the right side of regulations while pushing innovative boundaries. Leah built our operational framework, creating processes that were efficient without being rigid. And I focused on vision, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of funding. The first month was brutal. We were burning through my savings at an alarming rate, working 18-hour days, and living on takeout and caffeine. But there was an energy in that cramped office that I hadn't felt in years. Every line of code, every legal document, every strategic decision was ours. No board oversight, no investor pressure, no Jake questioning our judgment. Sophie's first breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Thursday. I'd stayed late to work on our pitch deck when I heard her shout from the other room. Emily, you need to see this. I found her at her computer, eyes wide with excitement, screens filled with scrolling data. I cracked it, she said. The predictive algorithm you outlined. It's not just working, it's working better than I expected. Look at these accuracy rates. I leaned over her shoulder and studied the numbers. Our AI wasn't just predicting user behavior. It was anticipating needs 3 steps ahead of anything currently on the market. This is incredible, Sophie. This changes everything. I know. With this kind of predictive capability, we're not just building a better social network. We're creating a platform that understands users better than they understand themselves. Within 2 months, we had a working prototype. It was rough around the edges, but the core functionality was revolutionary. Users could connect not just based on shared interests, but on predicted compatibility. Content was curated not just for engagement, but for genuine value. The platform learned and adapted in real time, becoming more useful with every interaction. Tom had been quietly reaching out to his network, and the response was promising. Regulatory experts were intrigued by our approach to privacy and data protection. Legal scholars were fascinated by our innovative consent frameworks. We weren't just building technology, we were establishing new standards for ethical AI development. Leah had assembled a small but talented team of engineers and designers, all recruited from her extensive Silicon Valley network. Each new hire brought fresh energy and perspectives, but more importantly, they brought belief in our mission. The breakthrough moment came when David Zhang requested a meeting. I was nervous as I walked into his Sand Hill Road office. David was known for being direct, sometimes brutally so. He'd made his fortune backing winners and had no patience for mediocrity. But he was also fair, and I'd always respected his judgment. "Emily," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk, "I've been hearing interesting things about your new venture." "All good things, I hope." "Mixed things. Some people think you're crazy for going up against ConnectTech. Others think you're brilliant. I'm leaning toward brilliant, but I need to see what you're building." I opened my laptop and launched our demo. For the next 30 minutes, I walked him through TechFront's capabilities, explaining not just what we'd built, but why it mattered. David asked sharp questions, probing our technical assumptions and business model, but I could see his interest growing. "Impressive," he said when I finished. Very impressive. Your predictive algorithms are at least 2 years ahead of anything else I've seen. Thank you. But I have concerns about market timing. Social networking is a mature space. Users are entrenched in existing platforms. Why would they switch? Because we're not just asking them to switch. We're offering them something fundamentally better. More relevant connections, more valuable content, more meaningful interactions. Once they experience what we've built, going back to current platforms will feel like returning to the Stone Age. David leaned back in his chair. And Jake, how do you think ConnectTech will respond to this competition? Probably poorly. Jake's never been good at handling pressure, and losing me has already destabilized their technical roadmap. When TechFront launches, they'll panic and make mistakes. Mistakes that could benefit us. Exactly. David was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. I'm going to make you an offer, Emily. But first, I need you to understand something. My investment in ConnectTech has become problematic. Jake's leadership is questionable, the technical team is demoralized, and they're burning cash on initiatives that aren't producing results. I'm looking for alternatives. My heart raced. What kind of offer? Seed funding. $2 million to start, with the potential for Series A leadership if you hit your milestones. But I want board representation and input on strategic direction. $2 million. It was enough to accelerate our development timeline by months, hire additional talent, and establish market presence before ConnectTech could respond effectively. I'll need to discuss it with my partners, I said. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Of course. But Emily? David's expression was serious. I'm not just investing in technology. I'm investing in revenge. And I want ConnectTech to understand exactly what they lost when they fired you. The tech front. Launch event was intentionally modest. While ConnectTech threw million-dollar product announcements with celebrity guests and media spectacles, we hosted 50 carefully selected tech journalists, investors, and industry influencers in a renovated warehouse in the Mission District. The space was raw brick and exposed beams, with our prototype displayed on elegant tablets scattered throughout the room. Sophie had insisted on doing the technical demo herself. She wore a simple black dress instead of her usual jeans and hoodie. But her passion was unmistakable as she walked the audience through our AI capabilities. Traditional social platforms show you what they think you want to see, she explained, manipulating the interface with practiced ease. TechFront shows you what you need to see. Watch this. On the screen, 2 user profiles appeared side by side. Sophie demonstrated how our algorithm identified not just surface-level compatibility, but deeper psychological and professional synergies. The platform could predict which connections would lead to meaningful relationships, which content would provide genuine value, and which opportunities aligned with users' unstated goals. The room was silent, captivated. Sarah Chen from TechCrunch was taking notes furiously. Michael Rodriguez from Wired had his phone out, likely recording. Even the usually jaded venture capitalists looked impressed. The implications are staggering, Sophie continued. We're not just connecting people, we're creating networks of mutual benefit that evolve and strengthen over time. This isn't social media, this is social intelligence. The Q&A session was intense. Journalists peppered us with questions about privacy, data protection, and market competition. Tom fielded the legal inquiries with his characteristic precision, while Leah addressed operational concerns. I handled the strategic questions, carefully positioning TechFront as the natural evolution of social networking rather than just another platform. But it was the question I'd been dreading that came from Jason Walsh, a veteran tech reporter who'd covered ConnectTech since our early days. Emily, there's obvious context here. You co-founded ConnectTech, built it into a billion-dollar company, and were recently separated from the organization. Is TechFront your response to that separation? The room went completely quiet. Every phone was recording, every pen was poised. This moment would define how our story was told in the press. Jason, that's fair to ask, I said calmly. Yes, I co-founded ConnectTech, and yes, I'm no longer part of that organization. But TechFront isn't about looking backward. It's about pushing forward. The concepts we're demonstrating today represent innovations I've been developing for years. Ideas that weren't possible within existing organizational structures. So this isn't about competition with ConnectTech? Competition suggests we're fighting for the same market. We're not. ConnectTech serves users who want traditional social networking. TechFront serves users who want something more sophisticated, more purposeful, more intelligent. There's room for both approaches. It was diplomatic, but everyone in the room understood the subtext. We were absolutely competing with ConnectTech, and we believed we were building something superior. The coverage was extraordinary. TechCrunch's headline read, TechFront's AI-driven social platform could redefine human connection. Wired called it the most ambitious social networking innovation in a decade. Even the Wall Street Journal, typically focused on business metrics, praised our revolutionary approach to digital relationship building. Within 48 hours, we had 10,000 beta sign-up requests. Within a week, that number had grown to 50,000. The waiting list became a viral phenomenon in itself, with people sharing screenshots of their queue positions like badges of honor. But the real validation came from an unexpected source, ConnectTech's emergency all-hands meeting. Sophie still had friends on the ConnectTech engineering team, and word filtered back quickly. Jake had called the meeting ostensibly to discuss Q4 priorities, but spent most of the time addressing what he called competitive threats in the marketplace. He looked rattled, Sophie's contact reported. Kept talking about how ConnectTech had first-mover advantage and established user base, but everyone could tell he was worried. He actually used the phrase copycat competitors, referring to us. The irony was delicious. Jake, who had built his career on incremental improvements to existing ideas, was calling us copycats for creating genuinely innovative technology. The real blow came 2 days later. Marcus Williams, ConnectTech's head of AI development and one of their most respected technical leaders, submitted his resignation. His LinkedIn update was subtle but clear. Excited to explore new opportunities in next-generation social intelligence platforms. My phone rang within an hour. It was Jake. Emily. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Hello, Jake. Congratulations on the great press coverage we've been getting. This isn't a game. You're actively damaging ConnectTech's business with these stunts. What stunts? Building innovative technology? Serving users who want something better? I thought that was called competition. You're poaching our employees. Marcus was under contract. Marcus made his own decision. Maybe you should ask why he wanted to leave. There was a long pause. What do you want, Emily? The question hung in the air. What did I want? Vindication? Revenge? Success? All of the above? I want to build the future of social networking, I said finally. Just like we always talked about doing. The difference is, now I'm actually doing it. You can't sustain this. You don't have the resources, the infrastructure, the market presence. You're burning David's money on a pipe dream. So he knew about David's investment. Interesting. Jake, you fired me 3 weeks before ConnectTech's IPO because you thought I was expendable. Now you're calling me because you're afraid I might be right about everything you said I was wrong about. Which is it? He hung up. That night, I sat in our cramped office with Sophie, Tom, and Leah, celebrating with cheap champagne and expensive sushi. The contrast felt appropriate. We were still operating on startup resources, but we were thinking like industry leaders. So what's next? Leah asked, refilling our glasses. Next, we scale, I said. We've proven the concept works. Now we prove it can compete. And if ConnectTech tries to stop us? Tom asked. Then we remind them why they fired the wrong person. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who looked apologetic as he handed me the thick envelope. ConnectTech Inc. versus TechFront Inc. and Emily Carter was emblazoned across the cover in formal legal typography, but the words inside were anything but formal. Jake was going for the throat. Tom read through the complaint with his lawyer's poker face, but I could see his jaw tightening with each page. The allegations were sweeping: theft of trade secrets, breach of fiduciary duty, tortious interference with business relationships, and violation of non-compete agreements. They were seeking an immediate injunction to shut down TechFront, claiming, "Our entire platform was built on ConnectTech's proprietary technology." "This is aggressive," Tom said finally, "and mostly baseless, but that doesn't mean it won't be expensive to fight." The timing was deliberate. We were 3 weeks away from launching our public beta, riding a wave of positive press coverage and investor interest. A protracted legal battle would drain our resources and distract us from product development. Even if we ultimately won, the delay could kill our momentum. "How strong is their case?" Sophie asked. She'd been quiet since Tom started reading, her face pale with worry. "Weak on substance, strong on disruption," Tom replied. "They're alleging that our predictive algorithms are based on work Emily did while at ConnectTech. The problem is, most of this technology development predates your employment there. I have your patents, your research notes, your academic publications, but proving prior art in court takes time." I studied the legal documents, recognizing Jake's strategy. He wasn't trying to win, he was trying to bleed us dry. ConnectTech had millions in legal reserves and an army of corporate attorneys. We had Tom, 2 junior associates, and David's increasingly nervous investment. "There's more," Tom continued. "They've also filed complaints with the SEC, claiming we're making fraudulent statements about our technology capabilities. And they've sent cease and desist letters to every major tech publication, threatening lawsuits if they continue covering TechFront without balanced reporting about the pending litigation." The media strategy was particularly insidious. Several outlets that had planned follow-up stories suddenly went quiet. TechCrunch's Sarah Chen called to apologetically explain that her editors were reassessing their coverage priorities. The tech podcast that had scheduled Sophie for an interview canceled without explanation. Within a week, our narrative had shifted from innovative startup disrupting social media to controversial company embroiled in legal disputes. The waiting list for our beta test dropped from 75,000 to 50,000, then to 40,000. Potential investors who had expressed interest suddenly had scheduling conflicts for pitch meetings. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Marcus Williams, the former ConnectTech engineer who had joined our team, knocked on my office door with an expression I'd never seen before: fear mixed with resignation. "Emily, I need to talk to you." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What's wrong?" ConnectTech's legal team contacted me yesterday. They're claiming I had access to proprietary algorithms that are now being used in TechFront's platform. They want me to sign an affidavit stating that our technology is derivative of their work. My stomach dropped. And I told them to fuck off. "But Emily, they have my employment records, my access logs, documentation of every project I worked on. They're building a timeline that suggests I brought ConnectTech's intellectual property to TechFront." "Did you?" "No, of course not. But some of the problems we're solving here, I explored similar approaches there. It's hard to prove that the solutions I'm implementing now aren't influenced by work I did then." This was the nightmare scenario. Jake wasn't just claiming we'd stolen ideas. He was building a paper trail to support those claims. Even if Marcus was completely innocent, which I believed he was, the ambiguity was enough to create reasonable doubt about our technology's originality. "What do you want to do?" I asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I think I need to step away, temporarily, until this gets resolved." I wanted to argue, to tell him we'd fight this together, but I understood his position. A prolonged legal battle could destroy his career regardless of the outcome. He had a family to think about, a mortgage to pay, a reputation to protect. "I'm sorry, Marcus. This isn't your fight. It shouldn't be yours either. Jake's turned into someone I don't recognize." After he left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the legal documents spread across my desk. The allegations were getting more creative by the day. ConnectTech's lawyers had somehow obtained copies of emails I'd sent while still employed there, cherry-picking phrases that could be interpreted as evidence of planned corporate sabotage. They'd found meeting notes where I'd discussed alternative approaches to social networking, discussions I remembered as theoretical brainstorming but which now looked like conspiracy planning. Sophie appeared in my doorway. "How bad is it?" "Bad. They're questioning everything, our technology, our team, our intentions. Even if we win, it's going to take months and cost hundreds of thousands in legal fees." "David's not going to like that." She was right. David Zhang hadn't become successful by throwing money at losing battles. Our legal expenses were already straining his investment, and we hadn't even reached discovery phase yet. "There's something else," Sophie continued. "I've been monitoring ConnectTech's technical recruitment. They're hiring aggressively, specifically targeting people with experience in predictive algorithms and AI-driven social networking. Building competing technology? Or preparing to claim that anything we develop was actually their idea? First, they're creating a parallel development track that could undermine our patent applications. It was a sophisticated strategy. Jake might not understand the technology himself, but someone was advising him well. By developing similar capabilities, internally, ConnectTech could argue that our innovations weren't actually innovative, just obvious extensions of existing approaches. My phone buzzed with a text from Leah. "Emergency. Need to talk. Now." I found her in the conference room, laptop open, expression grim. "We have a problem, a big one." "Bigger than the lawsuit?" "Different kind of problem. I've been analyzing our user engagement data from the beta test, and something's wrong. Really wrong." She turned her screen toward me. "Look at these patterns. Massive coordinated signups, followed by minimal engagement. Fake reviews on social media. Bot networks spreading negative commentary about our platform." The data was damning. Thousands of fake accounts had signed up for our beta test, apparently designed to dilute our user base and skew our engagement metrics. Worse, they were actively posting negative feedback about platform usability and privacy concerns. "This is a coordinated attack," I said. "Has to be. The timing coincides exactly with the lawsuit filing. Someone wanted to hit us from multiple angles: legal pressure, media manipulation, and user experience sabotage." "Jake?" "Jake doesn't have this kind of technical sophistication, but he might have hired people who do." I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the scope of what we were facing. This wasn't just business competition, it was corporate warfare. Jake had decided that if he couldn't win by building better technology, he'd win by destroying ours. "What do we do?" Leah asked. I looked around our small conference room, whiteboards covered with product roadmaps, walls lined with user feedback, desks cluttered with the organized chaos of a team building something they believed in. 3 months ago, this had all been a dream. Now it felt like a war zone. "We fight back," I said, "but we fight smart. Tom handles the legal defense. You and Sophie focus on product development and user experience. And I'm going to have a conversation with someone who might be able to help us level the playing field." "Who?" "David Zhang. It's time to find out how serious he is about wanting ConnectTech to understand what they lost. David Zhang's office felt different this time. The same panoramic view of Silicon Valley, the same minimalist furniture, but the energy had shifted. Where our first meeting had been cautious optimism, this felt like a war council. "They're bleeding money," David Aindes said without preamble, sliding a folder across his desk. ConnectTech's legal fees have tripled in the past month. Their burn rate is unsustainable, especially with the IPO postponed indefinitely. I opened the folder. Financial projections, board meeting minutes, internal memos. David had access to ConnectTech's most sensitive information. As a major investor, he was entitled to transparency, but sharing it with me crossed into dangerous territory. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Jake is destroying the company I invested in. Their engineering team is demoralized, their product roadmap is stagnant, and they're spending more on attacking you than on actual innovation." David leaned back in his chair. "I want my money back, Emily, and I want Jake to understand that firing you was the worst decision in ConnectTech's history." The documents painted a grim picture. ConnectTech's user growth had stalled, their engagement metrics were declining, and 3 more senior engineers had quit in the past 2 weeks. Meanwhile, legal expenses were consuming nearly 30% of their operating budget. "What are you proposing?" "Partnership. I'm prepared to double my investment in TechFront, $4 million additional funding, connections to enterprise clients, access to my entire portfolio network. In exchange, I want board representation and a commitment to aggressive market expansion. $4 million would solve our immediate problems, and then some. We could hire the best legal team in the Valley, accelerate product development, and launch marketing campaigns that would dwarf ConnectTech's reach. And the conflict of interest? I'm divesting from ConnectTech, selling my shares back to the company at a significant discount. It's worth the loss to be free of Jake's incompetence." The implications were staggering. David wasn't just switching sides. He was publicly declaring no confidence in ConnectTech's leadership. When news broke that a founding investor was abandoning ship, it would send shockwaves through the industry. "There's one condition," David continued. "I want Jake to know this is personal. When we announce my investment in TechFront, I want him to understand that his betrayal of you led directly to his downfall." It felt like justice and revenge wrapped in venture capital. But something about David's intensity made me cautious. Investors driven by emotion made unpredictable partners. "David, I appreciate the offer, but I need to discuss this with my team. We've built TechFront on principles of integrity and long-term thinking. I won't compromise those values even for funding." He smiled, the first genuine expression I'd seen from him all meeting. "That's exactly why you're worth backing. Jake would have taken the money without asking questions. You're already proving you're the better leader." I left his office with the term sheet and a new appreciation for the complexity of Silicon Valley relationships. Alliances shifted quickly here, driven by pragmatism as much as principle. But David's support could be the game changer we needed. Back at TechFront, Sophie was waiting with updates that complicated everything. "The bot attacks are getting more sophisticated," she reported. "They're not just creating fake accounts anymore. They're using machine learning to mimic real user behavior. It's harder to detect, and it's poisoning our algorithm training data." Tom looked up from his laptop. "And the legal front isn't improving. ConnectTech filed 3 additional motions today, including a request for expedited discovery of our source code. They want access to everything we've built. They're trying to reverse engineer our technology through the legal system," Leah added. "If they get access to our code, they could build competing features faster than we can defend our market position." I told them about David's offer. The room was quiet as they processed the implications. "It's a lot of money," Sophie said finally. "And we desperately need it. But accepting means we're officially at war with ConnectTech, not just competing." "We're already at war," Tom replied. "They made that choice when they filed the lawsuit. The question is whether we want to fight with adequate resources or keep struggling on our own." Leah was more thoughtful. "David's right about one thing. Jake's destroying ConnectTech from the inside. Their best people are leaving, their culture is toxic, their innovation has stalled. But do we want to be responsible for the final blow?" It was the moral question I'd been avoiding. TechFront had started as a way to prove my worth, to build something better than what I'd left behind. But somewhere along the way, it had become about more than just success. It had become about justice. ConnectTech chose this path, I said. Finally. They could have let me go quietly, focused on their own growth, competed on merit. Instead, they chose sabotage and legal warfare. If that destroys them, it's a consequence of their own decisions. Sophie nodded slowly. "So we take David's money?" "We take David's money, but we do it our way, with our values intact, and we use those resources to build something so innovative, so obviously superior, that the market makes the final judgment about who deserves to succeed." That evening, I called David to accept his terms. Within hours, news of his divestment from ConnectTech was spreading through Silicon Valley's gossip networks. By morning, it would be front-page news in every tech publication. Jake's phone call came at 11 p.m. "Congratulations," he said, his voice hollow. "You got what you wanted." "I wanted to build great technology and serve users well. Everything else is just consequence." "David's investment is blood money. You know that, right? He's not backing you. He's buying my destruction." There was pain in his voice, genuine anguish that almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. "Jake, you had everything. A successful company, a talented team, the respect of the industry. You threw it away because you were afraid of sharing credit. Don't blame me for building something better in the wreckage." He was quiet for a long moment. "This isn't over, Emily." "I know. But for the first time since this started, I'm looking forward to finding out how it ends." The announcement broke at 6 a.m. Pacific Time. TechCrunch's headline read, "David Zhang divests from ConnectTech, leads $4 round for rival TechFront." By 8 a.m., every major tech publication had picked up the story. By noon, ConnectTech's stock price had dropped 12%. I watched the coverage from our conference room, surrounded by my team and a spread of pastries that Leah had bought to celebrate. The media narrative was exactly what we'd hoped for. Respected investor abandons struggling company to back innovative competitor founded by ousted visionary. "Listen to this," Sophie said, reading from her phone. Wall Street Journal, Zhang's move signals broader concerns about ConnectTech's leadership and strategic direction, following the controversial departure of co-founder Emily Carter. She grinned. They're using words like controversial departure instead of firing. The narrative is shifting. Tom was monitoring legal developments. ConnectTech's lawyers filed an emergency motion this morning, claiming David's investment creates a conflict of interest that taints the entire lawsuit. They want his prior access to their confidential information declared prejudicial. "Will it work?" I asked. "Doubtful. David's divestment was clean, and venture capitalists switch portfolio companies all the time, but it shows they're panicking." The panic was evident everywhere. ConnectTech's PR team issued 3 different statements throughout the day, each one more defensive than the last. Jake appeared on Bloomberg TV for a damage control interview that went poorly. He looked tired, unprepared, unable to articulate a compelling vision for the company's future. But the real turning point came from an unexpected source. Kara Johnson called me at 3 p.m. "Emily, darling, have you seen LinkedIn today?" I pulled up the platform and immediately understood what she meant. Marcus Williams, the former ConnectTech engineer who'd stepped away from TechFront to avoid legal complications, had posted a lengthy statement. It was measured, professional, and devastating. After careful consideration and legal consultation, I want to address recent claims about intellectual property and technology development. During my time at ConnectTech, I worked on traditional social networking features that are well documented in existing literature. The advanced AI capabilities being developed at TechFront represent genuinely novel approaches that didn't exist during my previous employment. I'm proud to rejoin the TechFront team as head of AI development. Within hours, his post had thousands of likes and hundreds of supportive comments from industry colleagues. More importantly, it provided public testimony from someone with intimate knowledge of both companies' technology stacks. "Marcus is coming back?" Sophie asked when I shared the news. Apparently so. David's legal team convinced him that ConnectTech's claims were too weak to sustain prosecution. He's willing to fight. The momentum was intoxicating. After weeks of playing defense, we were finally advancing. David's connections opened doors that had been firmly closed: enterprise clients, strategic partnerships, media opportunities. Our user base, which had stagnated during the legal attacks, began growing again. But success brought new pressures. David's involvement meant board meetings, investor updates, and strategic oversight that I wasn't entirely comfortable with. During our first formal board meeting, he pushed for aggressive expansion plans that felt premature. "We should be targeting ConnectTech's enterprise clients directly," he argued. Salesforce, Adobe, Microsoft, companies that are paying ConnectTech millions for social collaboration tools that our platform could replace. "Our platform isn't ready for enterprise deployment," Sophie interjected. "We're still optimizing the AI algorithms for scale. Rushing to market could damage our reputation." "Reputation is less important than market share," David replied. "ConnectTech is vulnerable right now. If we don't strike quickly, they'll have time to rebuild." I found myself in the uncomfortable position of mediating between my technical co-founder and my primary investor. Sophie was right about the technology timeline, but David was right about the strategic window. "What if we compromise?" I suggested. "Limited beta deployment with select enterprise clients, with the understanding that this is pre-release technology. We get market validation without overcommitting our capabilities." It was a solution that satisfied no one completely but everyone partially, the hallmark of effective leadership, Kara had once told me. The real validation came 2 weeks later. Microsoft, one of ConnectTech's largest enterprise clients, agreed to pilot TechFront's collaboration features. The contract was worth $500,000 and included provision for full deployment if the pilot succeeded. Jake's response was swift and predictable. ConnectTech's lawyers filed for an injunction claiming that our Microsoft contract violated non-compete clauses and constituted tortious interference with existing business relationships. But their legal position was weakening. 3 previous motions had been denied, and the judge was showing impatience with what she called frivolous attempts to litigate away legitimate competition. The Microsoft pilot launched on a Thursday. By Friday, their internal metrics showed engagement rates 40% higher than ConnectTech's platform. By the following Monday, they'd requested expansion to additional teams. That evening, I sat in my office reviewing user feedback from the Microsoft deployment. The comments were overwhelmingly positive. Users loved the predictive networking features, the intelligent content curation, the seamless integration with existing productivity tools. Sophie knocked on my door. "Emily, you need to see this." She handed me her phone. ConnectTech's head of product development, Sarah Kim, had just announced her resignation on Twitter. Her statement was brief but pointed. "Excited to explore opportunities with companies that prioritize innovation over litigation." "She's the 3rd senior departure this month," Sophie said. "Their entire product team is disintegrating." I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt something closer to sadness. ConnectTech had been my creation too, built with passion and hope and the belief that technology could improve people's lives. Watching it collapse felt like witnessing The destruction of something I'd once loved, even if that destruction was partially self-inflicted. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" I asked Sophie. She was quiet for a moment. "I think we're building something beautiful and important. If that happens to prove that Jake made terrible decisions, well, that's not our fault. Maybe..." She was right. Maybe the best revenge really was massive success, and the collateral damage to ConnectTech was simply the cost of their own poor choices. But as I locked up the office that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the final confrontation was still coming. The call came at midnight on a Sunday. Jake's voice was different, not the controlled corporate tone I'd grown accustomed to, but something raw and desperate. "Emily, we need to meet, just the two of us. No lawyers, no board members, no press." I was in my kitchen, reviewing TechFront's latest user metrics over a glass of wine. Our growth had been explosive, 200,000 active users and counting, with engagement rates that made ConnectTech's numbers look embarrassing. "Jake, it's midnight. I know what time it is. I haven't slept in 3 days. Emily, please. One conversation. That's all I'm asking." There was something in his voice that I hadn't heard since our garage days. Vulnerability, the sound of someone who'd lost control of everything he thought he understood. "Where?" "Our old place, the cafe in Palo Alto where we used to work. On weekends. Tomorrow at 8 a.m. Cafe Venetia hadn't changed in 13 years. Same mismatched furniture, same temperamental espresso machine, same corner table where Jake and I used to spread out laptops and dream about changing the world. I arrived first, ordering coffee and settling into our old spot, wondering what kind of conversation we were about to have. Jake looked terrible when he walked in. Rumpled clothes, hollow eyes, the appearance of someone who'd aged 5 years and 5 months. He ordered coffee with shaking hands and sat across from me without speaking for nearly a minute. "ConnectTech is dying," he said finally. "I know. The board is going to fire me. Tomorrow, probably. Maybe today, depending on when they can schedule an emergency meeting." I studied his face, looking for signs of the friend I'd once trusted completely. "I'm sorry, Jake. I really am." "Are you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you got exactly what you wanted." The accusation hung between us like smoke. Part of me wanted to deny it, to claim that TechFront's success was purely about innovation and market opportunity. But that would have been dishonest. I wanted to build something better than what we had. I wanted to prove that firing me was a mistake, if that destroyed ConnectTech in the process. I shrugged. "You chose the battlefield, Jake. I just chose to fight back." He laughed bitterly. "Fight back? Emily, you didn't fight back. You declared war. The lawsuits, the media campaign, stealing our employees, targeting our clients. This wasn't competition. It was annihilation. You started the lawsuits. You started the sabotage. I just finished what you began. And now what? You've won. ConnectTech will be gone within 6 months and TechFront will dominate the market. Are you satisfied?" The question forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. Was I satisfied? TechFront's success felt hollow somehow, tainted by its connection to ConnectTech's destruction. I'd set out to prove my worth, but somewhere along the way, it had become about proving Jake's worthlessness instead. "I'm satisfied that we built something innovative and valuable," I said carefully. "I'm satisfied that users are choosing our platform because it serves them better. Everything else is just consequence." "Consequence," Jake repeated. "That's one way to put it. Another way would be to call it revenge." He wasn't wrong, but I wasn't going to apologize for succeeding after he'd tried to erase me. "Why did you fire me, Jake? Really? Not the corporate doublespeak, not the board alignment bullshit. Why?" He was quiet for a long time, staring into his coffee cup like it might contain answers. "Because I was scared," he said finally. "Scared?" That everyone would realize you were the real visionary and I was just support staff. Scared that the IPO would make you rich and famous while I remained in the background. Scared that I'd spent 12 years building your company instead of mine. The honesty was startling. I'd expected justifications, rationalizations, perhaps even continued hostility. Instead, he was giving me something I hadn't realized I needed. The truth. It was never just my company, Jake. We built it together. No, Emily, you built it. I helped, but the vision, the innovation, the drive, that was all you. I just provided business development and told myself I was an equal partner. You were an equal partner. Was I? Be honest. How many of our major breakthroughs came from my ideas versus yours? How many strategic decisions would have been different if I hadn't been there? I wanted to contradict him, to insist that our partnership had been genuinely collaborative. But looking back with brutal honesty, he was right. Jake had been talented at execution, but the creative spark had mostly come from me. That doesn't mean firing me was justified. No, it doesn't. It was cowardly and stupid and self-destructive, but I couldn't see another way to step out of your shadow. We sat in silence for several minutes. Two people who'd once been inseparable now separated by choices that couldn't be undone. What will you do now? I asked. I don't know. Try to find another position somewhere, assuming anyone will hire me after this disaster. Maybe leave tech entirely, start over. You're still young, Jake, still talented. This doesn't have to define the rest of your career. Doesn't it? I'll always be the guy who fired Emily Carter and destroyed ConnectTech. In the process, that's my legacy now. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to offer some gesture of forgiveness or reconciliation. But another part, the part that remembered the betrayal, the humiliation, the sleepless nights, wasn't ready for that kind of grace. I need to ask you for something, Jake continued. A favor. What? When ConnectTech collapses, and it will, there are going to be a lot of people out of work. Good people who didn't deserve to get caught up in our war. Engineers, designers, support staff, people with families and mortgages and dreams. I could see where this was going. You want me to hire them. TechFront is going to need talent. As you scale, these people know social networking technology, they're already trained and they're not responsible for my mistakes. Will you consider them? It was a reasonable request, maybe even an ethical obligation. But it also felt like Jake asking me to clean up his mess, to take responsibility for the collateral damage of his decisions. I'll consider anyone who wants to apply, I said finally. But they'll be hired on merit, not charity. That's fair. More than fair. Jake stood up, leaving his coffee mostly untouched. Emily, for what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've built with TechFront. It's better than ConnectTech ever was. Better than anything I could have created. Jake, no. Let me finish, I'm sorry. For the firing, for the lawsuits, for trying to destroy something beautiful because I was too insecure to compete honestly. You deserved better from me. He turned to leave, then paused. And Emily? When TechFront goes public, and it will, remember? That success feels different when you don't have to destroy people to achieve it. I watched him walk away, this person who'd been my partner, my friend, my betrayer. The man who'd shaped my career in ways both positive and devastating. I felt anger and pity and sadness and relief all tangled together in a knot I couldn't untangle. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophie. Microsoft wants to expand the pilot to their entire global workforce. This is it, Emily. We've won. Won, past tense, final result, game over. But sitting in that cafe where everything had started, victory felt more complicated than I'd expected. Success, it turned out, was easier to achieve than to understand. 2 years later, I stood in TechFront's new headquarters overlooking San Francisco Bay. watching the sunrise paint the water gold. The building was everything ConnectTech's sterile offices had never been. Open, collaborative spaces with natural light flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows, comfortable nooks for impromptu conversations, walls lined with whiteboards covered in the beautiful chaos of innovation and progress. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, and I barely recognized the person I'd become. The Emily Carter who'd been fired from ConnectTech had been driven by fear disguised as ambition, fear of failure, of being overlooked, of not mattering. This Emily felt different, grounded, purposeful in a way that went beyond proving points or settling scores. "You're here early," Sophie said, appearing beside me with 2 cups of coffee. She'd cut her hair short and started wearing bolder colors, small changes that reflected her growing confidence as TechFront's CTO. "Couldn't sleep?" "Actually, I slept great. First time in months. I just wanted to see the sunrise from our new office." Our new office. The phrase still felt surreal. 6 months ago, we'd been crammed into those 2 rooms above the coffee shop, surviving on David's investment and pure determination. Now we occupied 4 floors of prime real estate, employed 300 people, and served over 10 million users worldwide. "Have you seen the Times article?" Sophie asked, handing me her phone. The New York Times business section featured a long-form piece about TechFront's meteoric rise and what they called the most dramatic corporate comeback story in Silicon Valley history. The reporter had interviewed dozens of sources, employees, investors, industry analysts, even some former ConnectTech staff. The narrative was compelling. Visionary founder betrayed by co-founder, builds superior company from scratch, transforms personal devastation into industry-changing innovation. It was accurate as far as it went, but it missed the more complex truth about what this journey had cost and what it had taught me about the difference between winning and succeeding. "They're calling you the architect of the most sophisticated social intelligence platform ever created," Sophie continued. "Also, a cautionary tale about the dangers of corporate betrayal and living proof that the best revenge is massive success." I handed the phone back. "Do you think that's what this was? Revenge?" Sophie considered the question carefully. "I think it started as survival and evolved into something more meaningful. The revenge part was just a side effect." She was probably right. Somewhere along the way, TechFront had stopped being about proving Jake wrong and started being about proving something larger. That technology could be both innovative and ethical, that companies could grow without destroying their values, that success didn't require sacrificing the people who helped achieve it. The office was filling up now. Early arrivals settling into their workstations with the quiet focus that had become TechFront's signature culture. No unnecessary meetings, no corporate theater, no politics masquerading as strategy. Just talented people building something they believed in. Marcus Williams waved from the AI development lab, where his team was working on the next generation of predictive algorithms. He'd become one of our most valuable leaders, bringing not just technical expertise, but moral clarity about how AI should be developed and deployed. Tom Foster was visible through the glass walls of the legal department, probably reviewing patent, applications, or partnership agreements. Leah Martinez was in the operations center, surrounded by monitors displaying real-time user metrics from around the world. Each of them had chosen to be here, drawn by the opportunity to build something meaningful rather than just profitable. The contrast to ConnectTech's final days, when people stayed out of financial necessity rather than professional passion, was stark. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Board meeting, 9 a.m. David Zhang, along with 2 other investors we'd brought in during our Series B round, would be arriving soon to review quarterly results and discuss strategic planning for the next phase of growth. The numbers were extraordinary. Revenue had grown 400% year over year. User engagement rates continued to climb as our AI systems became more sophisticated at understanding and serving individual needs. Enterprise clients were reporting productivity, gains that translated into millions of dollars in value. We were profitable, sustainable, and positioned for long-term growth. But more importantly, we were building something that mattered. TechFront hadn't just displaced ConnectTech in the market, it had redefined what social networking could be. Instead of feeding users content designed to maximize engagement regardless of value, our algorithms prioritized meaningful connections and genuinely useful information. Instead of treating user data as a commodity to be harvested and sold, we'd implemented privacy protections that became industry standards. The irony wasn't lost on me. By setting out to prove that Jake had made a mistake in firing me, I'd accidentally created the company I'd always wanted ConnectTech to become. Kara Johnson appeared in my office doorway, carrying a small wrapped package and wearing the knowing smile that meant she had wisdom to share. "Good morning, CEO Carter. Congratulations on the Times article." "Thank you, though I'm not sure I recognize the person they're writing about." "Really?" "Because I see her perfectly clearly. The Emily who started ConnectTech in her garage was brilliant, but afraid. The Zaos, Emily who was fired, was devastated but determined. This Emily," she gestured around the office, "she's complete. She knows who she is and what she stands for." Kara had been instrumental in helping me navigate the emotional complexities of TechFront's success. When guilt about ConnectTech's collapse threatened to undermine my confidence, she'd reminded me that I wasn't responsible for Jake's choices. When David pushed for aggressive strategies that felt wrong, she'd helped me find ways to maintain our values while still growing the business. "I brought you something," she said, handing me the package. Inside was a small framed photograph, the original TechFront team in our cramped first office, huddled around Sophie's laptop for our initial product demo. We looked exhausted, exhilarated, and utterly convinced we were about to change the world. "You did change the world," Kara said, reading my expression. "Maybe not in the way you originally intended, but in ways that matter more." The board meeting went smoothly. David was pleased with our financial performance and strategic positioning, but he was more interested in discussing our expansion into international markets and the potential for an IPO within the next 18 months. "The market conditions are perfect," he argued. "Tech stocks are strong, social media platforms are valued at premium multiples, and TechFront has the growth trajectory and competitive positioning to command top-tier pricing." "What's the rush?" I asked. "We're profitable, we're growing organically, and we're building sustainable value. Why complicate things with public market pressures?" "Because going public isn't just about raising capital," David replied. "It's about legitimacy, market recognition, and providing liquidity for everyone who helped build this company. Your employees have stock options that are worth millions on paper. Don't you want to make that real for them?" He had a point. Sophie, Tom, Leah, Marcus, all of them had taken significant financial risks to join TechFront in its early days. They deserved to benefit from the value they'd helped create. "Let's table the IPO discussion for now," I said, "but start the preliminary work: financial audits, regulatory compliance, investment banking relationships. When we're ready to make that decision, I want us to be prepared." After the meeting, I found myself back at the window, looking out at the bay. A text message from an unknown number interrupted my thoughts. "Congratulations on the Times article. You've built something incredible." "Jake." I stared at the message for a long time. It had been 8 months since our conversation at Cafe Venetia, and I hadn't heard from Jake since. According to industry gossip, he'd taken a position at a smaller tech company in Seattle, rebuilding his reputation one project at a time. ConnectTech had officially dissolved 6 months ago, its remaining assets acquired by a competitor for a fraction of their former value. I started to type a response several times, then deleted the words. What was there to say? "Thank you" felt inadequate. "I'm sorry" felt dishonest. In the end, I simply wrote, "Thank you. I hope you're building something you're proud of too." His response came quickly. I am. Slowly, but I am. That evening, I hosted a company-wide celebration at a rooftop bar in Soma. 300 employees, their families, key partners, and investors gathered to mark what everyone was calling TechFront's emergence as a major force in the technology industry. Sophie gave a speech about the technical innovations that had made our success possible. Tom spoke about building a company culture based on integrity and respect. Leah shared metrics about our positive impact on users' professional and personal lives. David offered remarks about TechFront's position in the broader technology ecosystem. When it was my turn to speak, I looked out at the faces gathered around me. People who'd chosen to believe in this vision, who'd worked impossible hours and taken enormous risks to build something beautiful. The view from the rooftop encompassed all of San Francisco, the city that had become synonymous with technological innovation and disruption. 2 years ago, I began, I thought I'd lost everything. My company, my career, my sense of purpose. I was wrong. I hadn't lost everything. I'd been set free to find something better. I paused, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. TechFront exists because a group of people decided that being fired wasn't the end of a story. It was the beginning of a better one. Because you chose to believe that innovation matters more than politics, that users deserve better than algorithms designed to manipulate them, and that success without integrity isn't really success at all. The applause was warm, genuine, filled with the satisfaction of shared accomplishment. Later, as the party wound down, I found myself on the rooftop's edge, looking out at the lights of Silicon Valley. Sophie joined me, along with Tom, Leah, and Marcus. So what's next? Marcus asked. IPO? International expansion? New product lines? All of that, probably, I said. But more importantly, we keep building something that matters. We prove that you can be successful without being ruthless, innovative without being destructive, profitable without forgetting why you started. Think Jake was right? Sophie asked. About success feeling different when you don't have to. Destroy people to achieve it? I considered the question. TechFront's success did feel different from ConnectTech's early victories. Cleaner somehow, more sustainable. Built on creation rather than competition, collaboration rather than conquest. I think Jake was right about a lot of things, I said finally. Just not about firing me. As we headed back to the party, I realized that for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about the past or worrying about the future. I was simply present in the moment, surrounded by people I trusted, celebrating something we'd built together. The girl who'd been fired from ConnectTech was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the best revenge wasn't massive success. It was building something so meaningful that revenge became irrelevant. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions about TechFront's future. But tonight, under the San Francisco stars, I was exactly where I belonged, leading a company that proved every day that there was a better way to do business, a better way to innovate, and a better way to succeed. The story wasn't ending. It was just beginning. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.